Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to sift through the information, forensic reports, parole transcripts, psychological studies, and really get to the core of what matters. Today, we're looking into a really disturbing case. Phillip Pizzo. He gained notoriety in the early 80s as the mall rapist in the greater Boston area. Our goal here is to analyze, his psychological makeup, break down the specific methods he used in his crimes, and track his path through the justice system over the years. But okay, before we even start, there's something really crucial we need to clear up, based right on the sources.
Yes, absolutely. Let's be crystal clear from the outset. We are discussing Phillip Pizzo, born 1950, the convicted rapist. It's vital, and the sources emphasize this, not to confuse him with Dr. Phillip A. Pizzo, who is a highly respected physician and academic. Accuracy here is just paramount to avoid any damaging false connections.
Right. Okay, that's incredibly important. So with that established, the sources basically frame Pizzo as this textbook example of a highly organized, ritualistic, and power-assertive sexual predator.
Yeah.
It suggests his violence wasn't random, it was, methodical.
Exactly. And to get that method, you really have to look back at his upbringing, the psychological roots. Pizzo came from a family that seemed okay on the surface. Father was an entrepreneur, financially stable, but inside it was apparently quite damaging psychologically. He reported physical abuse from his father, and this seems to have created these deep feelings of worthlessness. His mother, he claimed at times, was sort of indifferent, emotionally neglectful. He directly linked his later actions back to this, saying it left him with basically no self-esteem.
Okay, so that's the internal pressure building up. But how did that actually manifest? How did it turn into the specific deviant behaviors before the rapes began? There seemed to be a clear escalation.
Oh, definitely. It's like a roadmap. By 16, this is around 1966, he was already engaging in voyeurism, specifically looking through windows to see women changing. Then, a year later, it progresses to transvestic fetishism, fondling his sister's undergarments while masturbating.
And how significant is it that just a year after that, at age 18, he actually got convicted for indecent exposure? He crossed a line into public offending quite early.
That's incredibly significant, yes. Moving from private acts like voyeurism and fetishism to a public offense like exposure, that's a major red flag. It signals, deteriorating internal controls. And the sources really point out the tragedy here. The justice system's response back in 1968 was justifying. It was a huge missed chance for intervention, potentially disrupting that whole pattern before it got worse.
A really critical failure then. So if that simmering dysfunction was the long burn, what actually ignited the spree of violent attacks between 83 and 84?
Pizzo himself pointed to a specific trigger: his engagement breaking up in mid-1983. For someone already feeling profoundly inadequate, this rejection was apparently catastrophic. He started frequenting Boston's Combat Zone, the adult entertainment district. And this seemed to just amplify all those feelings of failure, twisting them into this intense misogynistic rage. His stated motive, it wasn't primarily about sexual release, it was about control. He actually said he wanted to gain power and control and make his victims feel his pain. The rape was the tool for achieving that absolute dominance.
And that need for control seems to pop up again decades later, doesn't it? During his parole hearings.
It really does. The parole board picked up on what looked like manipulation. His story about his mother started to change. The woman he once described as indifferent suddenly became overbearing.
Okay. Shifting the narrative.
Exactly, and the board saw that inconsistency. Blaming an overbearing parent can sound like you're taking responsibility, but it can also be a way to deflect, to gain sympathy without showing real insight. It suggested that core manipulative aspect was still there.
So that's the psychology, the internal driver. Let's shift now to the crimes themselves, the external actions. This is where the meticulous planning really comes into focus. It wasn't just violence, it was almost a performance. The sources describe his crimes as meticulously planned, following very specific routines. Let's start with how he hunted for victims. He had a type: young women, generally 19 to 28, and specific locations.
Right. Suburban mall parking lots were his hunting grounds, places like Meadow Glen Mall, Woburn Mall, North Shopping Center. He preferred the evening, usually between 5 and 8 p.m., and the preparation was chillingly patient. He'd sit in his car, apparently drinking alcohol, just watching, waiting for a woman returning to her car alone. He wasn't living it to chance, he was engineering the opportunity.
And the abduction itself is a sudden blitz attack, right? Designed for instant control.
Instant control was key. He'd wear a ski mask, yank the car door open, knife immediately to the throat, force her into the passenger seat. Bang! Done in seconds. Then, immediate restraints. hands tied behind her back, and then he'd use his own ski mask to blindfold her face.
But then there's this weird psychological twist. He'd apparently try to reassure them, saying he wouldn't hurt them, just wanted money. Why do that if he already had physical control?
It's psychological manipulation 101 for this kind of offender. It wasn't about making them feel better, it was about lowering resistance. If they believe it's just a robbery, they're more likely to comply, thinking compliance equals survival. It turns the victim into a cooperative element in his ritual, allowing him to proceed without a struggle. The robbery was just the opening act.
Just a means to an end.
Precisely. The real goal was always the violation.
And the violation continued during the transport phase, didn't it? He'd move him to his car.
Yeah, he'd drive the victim's car first to a secluded spot where his own car was hidden. Then he'd transfer her to his vehicle for the drive to his home in Westford. And during that drive, the psychological violation intensified. The sources are explicit about this. He'd ask incredibly intrusive personal questions like, are you faithful to him? Probing her life, establishing this perverse kind of intimacy. And the physical violation also started then. He began touching them, specifically pinching the breasts and genitals of several victims during that car ride. It was a gradual, ass-sashifying dehumanization process before they even got to his house.
Okay, so they arrive at his house in Westford, and the scene there, it speaks volumes about the ritualistic nature of this.
It really does. The bedroom wasn't just a random room. It was a prepared stage. He'd lead the victim inside, but then he performed this incredibly bizarre, almost clinical action. He covered the walls, which apparently had some kind of dramatically patterned wallpaper, with black plastic sheeting.
Black plastic sheeting, why?
Mm-hmm.
What's the significance of that specific detail?
It's pure psychological stagecraft. It wasn't for practical reasons like soundproofing. It was symbolic. It transformed a normal domestic space, a bedroom, into this cold, sterile, impersonal chamber. It erases any sense of home, of reality. It functions to psychologically erase the victim's identity within that space, reinforcing his absolute control and setting the stage for complete dehumanization. Only then, in that prepared space, would he put on a different mask, remove her blindfold, force her to drink alcohol, another control tactic, weakening resistance, and then he would rape and sodomize her for hours.
Just horrific. And he was smart enough, forensically aware enough to try and cover his tracks afterwards.
Frighteningly so. He knew about evidence. After the hours-long assault, he would systematically try to destroy any biological trace. He forced victims to shower, and in one particularly extreme case, he actually forced a victim into his swimming pool, deliberately washing away DNA. It just underscores the cold calculation.
In the final act of control, the return.
Yes, the final cruelty. He would drive the victims all the way back to the same mall parking lots where he'd abducted them hours before, forcing them back to the very spot their world was shattered. It just compounded the trauma, stamping his dominance onto the entire experience from beginning to end.
This horrific pattern finally broke in January 1984. One victim fought back.
She did. Despite being stabbed in the mouth during the struggle, she managed to escape. Her incredible bravery meant she could give the police a detailed description of Pizzo and his car. That led directly to his arrest in March 1984.
And the evidence against him must have been overwhelming.
It was. Pizzo pled guilty to everything in 1984. Aggravated rape, armed robbery, the works. He received 11 concurrent life sentences. Now, officially, he was convicted for raping 7 women. But the sources strongly suggest the real number was much higher. He later admitted to 10 aggravated rapes and even confessed to investigators he might have assaulted as many as 20 women in total.
20? That's staggering. So conviction, life sentences. But then there's another layer to his time in the system, the sexually dangerous person designation.
Right. In 1985, he was formally designated an SDP. This wasn't part of his criminal sentence per se, it was a civil commitment. It meant she spent the next 24 years at the Massachusetts Treatment Center, which is specifically for treating sexual offenders.
Okay, 24 years in treatment, but then in 2009 something changed.
Yes, and this is a really crucial point the sources highlight. In 2009, he was discharged from that SDP status. 5 out of 6 experts who evaluated him concluded he no longer met the specific legal criteria to be civilly committed as an SDP.
Wait. If he was deemed no longer meeting the criteria for SDP commitment, why wasn't he released? That sounds contradictory.
It sounds contradictory, but it's a critical legal distinction. Being found to no longer meet the criteria for treatment as an SDP is completely different from being found safe to release into the community. The discharge just meant he moved from the treatment center back into a regular prison to continue serving his original life sentences. The parole board has a totally different job. Their mandate is much stricter, assessing his risks to public safety.
I see. So the treatment center looks at clinical criteria, the parole board looks at societal risk.
Exactly. And that distinction is why he's been denied parole consistently in 2010, 2015, and again in 2020. The board repeatedly found he hadn't shown a level of rehabilitative progress that would make his release compatible with the welfare of society.
So what was missing? He spent 24 years in treatment programs.
This really gets to the heart of the limits of institutional rehabilitation, doesn't it? Pizzo got very good at using the language of therapy. He could talk about his childhood trauma, the abuse, the failed engagement. He could list all the programs he completed, like emotional awareness. But what the parole board consistently found lacking was a genuine, deep, empathetic understanding of the lifelong devastation he inflicted on his victims.
So they basically saw it as a performance. He learned the script, but didn't internalize the meaning.
That seems to be the assessment, yes. That his rehabilitation felt like something performed to achieve release, rather than reflecting a true, fundamental change in his character driven by remorse and empathy.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what's the key takeaway for you listening to this? This deep dive offers a chillingly clear picture of how deep-seated psychological issues can evolve into highly organized ritualistic violence. It shows a creditor driven not by impulse, but by a meticulous, pathological need for absolute power and control, laid bare in the forensic details.
And it really underscores the vital function of the parole board. They act as that crucial final check, needing to see beyond just program completion certificates. Their job is to gauge authentic psychological change, the kind necessary for genuine community safety, not just therapeutic fluency.
And we'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. Pizzo admitted he might have raped as many as 20 women. Think about the victims who never came forward, maybe out of fear or trauma or shame. How does that unseen, uncounted suffering factor into how the justice system assesses the true risk of an offender like this decades down the line? It's a heavy question with no easy answer, something to mull over.